To lectures by Lob-EZ. I'm your host, Dr. Lob-EZ. In today's video, we'll be discussing none other than Louis XIV. Before we begin talking about him, we want to backtrack just a little bit to where we left off on the previous video, and that is the death of both Louis XIII and Cardinal Richelieu, who not only started out as Louis XIII's regent, but really was his chief minister, and he more effectively, probably than Louis himself, helped establish absolutism in France. So when they both die within a year of one another, 1642 and 1643 respectively, that means there's going to be a new king on the throne. And just like when Louis XIII came to the throne, his son, Louis XIV, is going to be but a boy, a 5-year-old boy. And so he has a regent selected for him whose name is Cardinal Mazarin, who is pictured above. In an attempt to challenge the authority of both Mazarin and, this boy king Louis, the nobles banded together in an uprising in what is called the Fronde. And this uprising, although ultimately put down, created quite a problem for Louis, because at one point, as rebels had gotten close to the royal palace in Paris, he was evacuated, and evidently, according to historians, this left a bit of a created a traumatic experience for the young king, and it was one that he never forgot. And so as a result of that, he resolved to break the power of the nobility. Okay, and so when Louis is old enough to assume the throne, when he reaches the age of majority, that's one of the things that is going to be his hallmark, is how he subordinates the nobility. Louis is going to go down in history as the most important, not only French monarch, but really the most important absolute monarch in all of Europe. His nickname, self-appointed, was the Sun King, and it really helps underscore and demonstrate how he was sort of the center of the European world during the age of absolutism. He was a monarch who was imitated, and his court life and his palace were attempted to be recreated in other countries. One of the things that we want to point out was he kind of goes an opposite direction that we see some nobles or some monarchs go, and that is where they try to subordinate the role of religion to political unity. And what I mean by that is kings sometimes, and queens, as in Queen Elizabeth in England, attempted to make peace amongst competing religions, like religious rivals. And so she made some concessions in her country to maintain political unity, okay? But that wasn't the case with Louis at all. He wanted political unity, and that needed to be reflected within religious unity. So as far as he was concerned, there was no possibility for religious tolerance for Protestant groups. And so he, spent time repealing the Edict of Nantes, which was what gave peace and brought the French Wars of Religion to a close. And he revokes that, and because of the inhospitable conditions for the Huguenots, 200,000 of them flee France for other parts of Europe, and then a small number also going to the Americas. we're looking at about a total population of about 800,000. So I'm assuming those 600,000 others either converted or did a very good job of covering up, their Protestantism and kind of worshiping in private. At any rate, moving forward, it's important to note the role that his chief finance minister, Jean-Baptiste Colbert, played in Louis's reign, and that was Colbert's use of the economic policy known as mercantilism. Just to note, it is a set of governmental policies designed to sort of play where the state plays the cheerleader, the role of the cheerleader for its country's economy. And the goal is with mercantilism to become as wealthy as possible. And the way that is reflected is by how much gold and silver the country possesses in its treasury. And the way to achieve that amount of gold was to have a favorable balance of trade, meaning you export more than you import. So the goal is to export manufactured goods and import, well, nothing really, have other countries pay for those goods with gold and silver. One of the ways to do this, the country had to be self-sufficient, had to be able to produce everything that it had, and sometimes colonies played a role in that, in providing raw materials. And of course, we'll talk about that in just a moment, France's colonies in the New World. So Colbert was able to make France sort of well known in the rest of Europe as far as their luxury goods. And so there was a huge market across Europe's wealthy elites for French-made goods, primarily luxury goods. And so what we see here is lace and tapestries, and those are two products that were highly sought after in other European countries. On this slide, we want to talk about the Canadian colony that was called New France, and the French government encouraged the French subjects to emigrate here to Canada to kind of help extract some of those raw materials like timber and animal pelts, primarily beavers, to be used in manufacturing of beaver skin hats and coats, and then also the wood to be used in the construction of ships. What we have here is a term subsidies, and this was something that Colbert used to really kind of assist those companies that might, let's say, for example, with shipbuilding, that's a very expensive endeavor. And so the government can give some financial aid to those companies that might, be in the business of manufacturing boats. And so they could, the government could encourage this by offering low interest loans or something called grants that don't need to be paid back, to kind of help companies get involved in that. And in the end, it's going to, benefit the French economy. And so that's one thing that he did. And then the other thing that he made use of were tariffs, and that was taxes placed on imports, and that is to incentivize among the French the purchase of foreign imported manufactured goods, and obviously incentivize them instead to purchase French-made goods. Okay. So the next topic we want to discuss is the Palace of Versailles. And initially, the Palace of Versailles was constructed by Louis's father, Louis XIII, as a hunting lodge. But so what Louis is going to do, he's going to enlarge this, and this is really going to be the symbol, become the symbol of his power. And as I said, a lot of other monarchs across Europe are going to try to copy this royal palace that he creates here. Okay, and so we want to just go back for a moment to the Fronde. That was that event, that uprising that sort of traumatized young Louis. And so he never forgave the Louis, or Louis never forgave the nobles, and so as he grew into adulthood, and he constructed this palace. This palace is going to serve many purposes. First and foremost, it's going to be his, personal residence. It's going to be the seat of government, so all the official governmental business is going to take place there. But he's going to also invite his nobles to live there, not to help him with governing. He's going to do the governing himself with his intendants. No, the purpose for the nobles to be there is to be part of the court life, is to be like a part of the social life that goes on. And he's doing this because he wants to keep an eye on him. But upon further study, we really see that what Louis is trying to do is weaken his nobility by bankrupting them, because living at Versailles was quite expensive. And Louis played a little game with his nobles where for them to gain Louis's favor, they had to be present as much as possible. And there was sort of an expectation among the nobles that they would host as many parties or balls or events in honor of the king, as a way to kind of show that they loved him. And these events were rather expensive, and so over time the nobles grew indebted and needed the king's assistance. Okay. And so just a couple of photographs here of the grounds at Versailles, and you can see that it's quite expansive, and it's rumored to have been so expensive that it required a full 25% of the French budget to maintain it. And then this photograph here is the very famed Hall of Mirrors. And you can see all the gilding, okay? And so what that means is the gold plating that's over everything. And so Louis spared no expense in creating this awesome royal palace. This slide here talks about the Lob-EZ, which was a ritual, a very odd ritual, where when Louis woke up in the morning, he was waited on by his most loyal and kind of closest nobles. And that it's really strange, because they're almost acting as if they're servants, because they're helping the king get dressed. But this was considered quite the privilege, because if you were part of this inner circle that took place in the Lob-EZ, the benefit was that Louis would grant favors, monetary favors. And so if you were part of this kind of humiliating ritual, the benefit was that, as I said, you could get some monetary favors in the form of patronage, royal patronage, that Louis would dispense. Okay, and so this was a very clever way for Louis to make the nobles financially dependent upon him. Okay, and so this was from the start really what he was trying to accomplish by breaking his nobles and making them financially dependent. And so if they're financially dependent upon him, they're never going to attempt to overthrow him. At least that was what he thought, and it proved to be correct, as it was successful. So the last thing that we need to talk about with Louis are his wars, okay? And so there were few moments of peace during his 72 years reign. And so want to show you here this map to underscore what Louis' foreign policy was. And it is to expand France's boundaries to the east. So he's going to fight several wars of territorial expansion. The goal was to move these, okay, this red line represents the easternmost boundaries of France. He wants to move it through acquisition and war to the Rhine River, which I'm showing here. And when it's all said and done, he has some success, but not entirely. So we'll talk about the most costly of his wars, which was the War of Spanish Succession. So what we need to do, though, before we talk about that, is kind of outline how it came to pass. So the War of Spanish Succession was fought in 1700, begins in 1700. We have to go to Spain and talk about Charles the Second, who died without a male heir. Okay, and this Charles II was among the Spanish Habsburg line, and they had a very strange custom of among the royals having arranged marriages within the Habsburg family. Okay, and so that resulted, unfortunately, in sometimes second cousins getting married, and then first cousins, and then also uncles marrying their nieces. And so this kind of inbreeding left but created a problem for Charles II. He was sexually impotent, meaning that he could not procreate. Okay, and so that is going to leave him without any heirs. And so, to avoid the crisis of succession, he named as his heir Philip of Anjou, who was a Bourbon. Philip was actually the nephew of Louis XIV, and so this created a lot of fear and concern across Europe that this would lead to the unification of the thrones of France and Spain, and perhaps even the full-on political unification of these two countries. And so that would totally upset the balance of power in Europe. And so we see for the first time ever, and this is significant about this conflict, the creation of an international alliance known as the Grand Alliance, and that's what this map shows. Some of the prominent countries that were involved were England, the Netherlands, and Austria, and also Prussia, which is a new country we haven't really discussed yet, but we will in a later video. At any rate, the war lasts for 14 years. It's not a devastating loss for France, but it's more of a war of attrition that eventually grinds to a halt. And this war is financially devastating to the French economy, and for the most part bankrupts France. And that, unfortunately, is going to be Louis's legacy. His lasting legacy is one of indebtedness for his country. And so the other thing that we want to mention with regard to this war is with the Treaty of Utrecht, France has to pledge that they are not going to attempt to unite or merge the thrones of France and Spain. We really see that although France, will continue to be the most powerful country on the continent of Europe, it does mark the rise of the British Empire. And then the last thing I just want to mention before we close out the video is the legacy of Louis. And this really underscores the problem with absolute monarchs, and that is when there is no one there to check their power. Oftentimes we see very, very costly wars, and these wars, as I said, can and often bankrupt countries. And so that is just one of the many reasons why absolutism, although it served its purpose for a period of time, but there's going to be an evolution, and there's going to be experimentation with other forms of government because of the many problems that absolutism creates. So that's going to be it for today. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks.